Hello and welcome to the second of our Destination Energy webinars. I'm Steve Barrett, and today we're focusing on something that matters to thousands of people across the UK right now. How to get into the energy and utility sector, even if you're just starting out, change in direction, or don't yet see yourself as someone with the right background. Our energy and utility skills strategy makes the challenge and opportunity clear. Across the utilities, more than 312,000 people will be needed by 2030. And in energy alone, the industry is expected to need an average of 22,400 new people every year out until 2030. So it's some significant growth there. For those looking at entry-level routes, that matters because there's more than half of those roles in the wider workforce demand are expected to require low to mid-level skills. In other words, it's not just a conversation about senior specialists. It's about real opportunities for real people starting out or changing career or coming back to work. One of the clearest priorities to attract new people into the sector and create more inclusive routes into long-term careers. Too many people still assume their careers are only for engineers or graduates or for people with years of experience. The reality is much broader than that. The sector needs practical thinkers, problem solvers, team players, people who care about making a difference, and people who are willing to learn and develop. In some cases, organizations are not asking for formal qualifications as the first hurdle. Instead, they're looking at whether people can demonstrate the behaviors, attitude, and potential needed for the role. And they're testing candidates against the job requirements through the interview process. So, if you're someone that's motivated, reliable, and ready to work, the sector may be far more open than you think. What makes these opportunities especially exciting, as they're not just jobs for today. They are pathways into long-term careers in industries that keep the country running and will play a central role in delivering net zero, energy security, environmental improvement, and economic growth. So why does it matter today? Today is about making that feel real, not through policy language or big statistics alone, but through honest stories from people at different stages in their careers. We want to show what these jobs look like, how people got in, what surprised them, what helped them succeed. And this could be a route in for you and worth considering as you go forward in your journey. We're today joined by a mix of voices. Rob, who has built a successful career and now manages multiple functions and many people across his business, and Nathan, who's only recently entered the sector through a less than conventional route. And between them, they can help us understand not just where these careers can lead, but what those first steps really look like. I'll ask them to introduce themselves, but before I do so, can I ask you to use the scan or the QR code on screen, just to scan the code so we can see where you are in your career. And through this, we're looking at, are you an early career, a mid-career, senior or specialist level, career changer, or return into work after a break? So without the aid of a safety net, a little bit of technology in there, but please do use the code just so we can get a little bit of a benchmark about where we're starting. So whilst you're doing that, then, can I just ask both Rob and Nathan to come off mute and introduce themselves?
I can jump in first for the two of us. So, hi, I'm Nathan. I am a strategy engineer at the National Energy System Operator. Day to day, I am currently building the offshore design processes that are laying out the future of the grid in Great Britain. Really working with technical teams, working with strategy teams to put that together. One of the interesting things about me, though, is I actually used to be a substation fitting apprentice, which is actually how I got into the industry. And then spent multiple years as a substation fitter on the tools on the front lines of the energy industry. I actually left school at 16 to go into that apprenticeship, and I'm sure I'll be going more into that experience as we go through the questions later, but lovely to be here.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nathan, and really excited to hear some of the stories which you can tell us and how you found it coming through that route. And Rob, how about yourself?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. And Steve, my name is Rob Thompson. I'm the technical director and the company's designated engineer for the Freedom Group, which is part of NG Bailey. Previous to that, I've worked at distribution network operators and also in a training environment and for a multinational energy industry institute. Prior to that, I actually joined the armed forces in the grassroots and engineering apprentice scheme. So lots and lots of affinity with the group and what we're going to talk about today, transferable skills and also those career pathways, which you think might not be available to you. Day to day, I look after the competence of nearly 2,000 employees, contractors, subcontractors for the Freedom Group, operating on UK distribution networks and also the transmission networks, in addition to our private networks and independent connection provider business. I also look after technical capability of the company and also our strategic workforce planning. I'm really, really excited to be here with you today.
Fantastic, Rob. Crikey, that sounds like quite a career. Forces into the sector and through various elements or structures and different roles to find yourself where you are today. So really interested to hear from you as we go through this process. So look, first impressions as you're coming through this, really important. And when you first looked at the energy and utility sector, what stood out for you and what made you think it might be worth exploring, just as people are continuing to answer the poll here? So, Rob, shall I come to you first? Because gone through a couple of changes there, right? I mean, how does that how does that look for you?
Yeah, it's stressful, Steve. I might think as we were heading through and navigating my career. So starting out in the armed forces, teamwork and resilience and your technical apprenticeships in the armed forces. There's lots and lots of benefits and transferable skills. And really, when you come to a crossing point in either midway or towards the end of your career in the armed forces, you tend to find and look for industries that have the same camaraderie and teamwork. And I think that first impressions for the energy industry is just that. Everybody getting together, part of the civil contingencies plan as well, especially for the distribution networks and the transmission networks. And it's really not in defence of the country, but also making sure that every part of the country can run smoothly. You'd be surprised until you've worked in a distribution network operator, actually how many people rely on electricity, not only for their day-to-day functions and work, but also from an actual living and supporting perspective, be it medical, transportation, infrastructure, and you get a good exposure to everybody that consumes electricity and really get to see that positive impact. So teamwork, getting together, that resilience, that camaraderie, and then also really being able to see the good that you're doing.
Fantastic, Rob. And for those of you that aren't aware out there, distribution networks, Rob, what would you say about the difference between transmission distribution networks? Because we talk a lot of lingo in our industry.
There we go. And Nathan can mark my homework as well, right? So here we go. So the transmission networks tend to be the large backbone to take all of our generation, be it offshore wind, battery energy storage, conventional power stations and power plants, and effectively transmit that around the country. And the distribution network operators transfer that down into more usable voltages, all the way down to what comes into your house, Steve, and your plug sockets. So that's a very brief overview, and I'll get a score out of 10, please, before Nathan answers that question.
Nathan, let's come to your score. No, let's not come to your score out of 10. Let's leave that. But it does seem complicated looking in, doesn't it? And I think some of the stories which you'll probably tell us today is it's not that complicated actually, and there's roles for everyone. So Nathan, let me come to you because you came through a slightly different channel in. So tell me what for both those roles in the energy sector, right? So what was most interesting? What stood out to you about the energy industry?
Yeah, so and I'll probably end up touching on that complexity as well because that kind of sits as part of my story. But I joined the industry at 16, so I was starting to look around kind of when I was 15 or so, kind of what do I want to do? Kind of thinking, I'll probably go to uni. What kind of subject do I want to do? And it always leans towards science, engineering of that kind. And I always had I don't know why, I had a bit of a kind of a feeling of like, energy seems kind of cool. Probably just, I think, built on kind of just seeing what was going on in the world, kind of seeing what was going on there. It's kind of, so I knew, I kind of want to go roughly in this direction, had no idea where in the industry I wanted to go because I had no idea what was inside it. Um, I was lucky enough to get to go on a residential training course for a week with National Grid while I was still at school, which
Wow.
really lifted the lid on the industry for me. Really showed me kind of a bit about what was going on behind the scenes. And I thought, so this is kind of what I want to do. I want to go into that transmission side. I want to be kind of the big links in that process. So I always knew there was a slight kind of direction there. And I think there was also a couple of other points as well of just knowing there's lots happening in the sector, kind of the sector's not staying still, which is a really, really interesting place to be. And also, quite bluntly, the job security is great. It's it's a really stable industry. Kind of looking ahead, there is always going to be a greater need for electricity, and that means that that's really good opportunities there.
Fantastic. And I think what's interesting for me is that it is the variety of kind of potential routes that you've got in as well. And I'm just going to refer back to the Slido because this is a real interesting mix, isn't it? Because people are thinking about coming into the industry, or they may be in industry, or they may be thinking about a transition across or from different parts. But if we're looking out, so 31% at the moment, the people that have submitted are just starting out. We've also got people that are mid-career, so we've got a real difference in perhaps experience levels there. Senior specialist level, so 7%. So that's crikey. I mean, that if there are people out there that are perhaps working in other adjacent industries, safety regulated, heavily regulated, those sorts of environments are absolutely ideal for coming into the energy industry. And if we go through thinking about that transition, I mentioned 312,000 people needed kind of over the next 4 years or so. Well, that's a massive uplift, and we need people at all levels to come through. But certainly some of those numbers at that entry level are absolutely critical as well. Early career as well, so gaining experience, brilliant to see that. And also people return into work and maybe perhaps are not in the workplace at the moment and thinking about how do we get in there. So how do we get into industry? I think that's probably the next important part. So I'll just pop these down, and whilst I'm doing so, just thinking about how you got into industry. I mean, what was the route into you, and how straightforward was it, or challenging was it to come in? And Nathan, shall I come to you first on that one?
Yeah, so I think the story I always tell is I never expected to do an apprenticeship. I always thought, oh, I was going to go to uni, I'm going to go get my degree, I'll go do something after that, kind of whatever. And then I genuinely thought, after having the lid lifted on the industry, well, maybe this is another option for me. Maybe I want to start kind of getting my teeth into it now. And that's why I actually went for the apprenticeship I did. It wasn't something I expected. I think it was a brilliant way into the industry, just seeing the training and support I got there, which I'm sure I'll go into more later. But yeah, I just decided, you know what, let's take the leap. Let's take the leap there and kind of get a foot in the door. In terms of actually kind of getting onto that apprenticeship, it was quite a long and kind of arduous kind of a interview process, but a really well supported one. So there was lots of steps, but kind of saw throughout the process that it was long because it was trying to judge me as an individual, not by a set of qualifications, and really wanted to get to know me and kind of where I fit in. And that's where how I kind of ended up where I did.
Excellent. Thanks, Nathan. That's really useful. I think hopefully people find that interesting, because I think you talked about an arduous process there. I think people you're being judged on what you're presenting at that time, as opposed to that stack of long list of qualifications, perhaps, which you've got in a in your bag. But I mean, that's kind of often not what it is. There are varied routes in, aren't there? So I think that's that's an important part to consider for everyone that's out there. And Rob, how about yourself? I mean, what's yours? What's your thoughts on that?
So I was much like Nathan, really. So you're going through the apprenticeship route on the tools, and then really understanding what you how the system works, because you're operating and maintaining it, albeit in a different industry. But it's a great parallel, I think, there, Steve, to say, look, I was still an electrical specialist inside the Royal Navy, so we still generated and distributed electricity. We just did it in a different way, and perhaps on a vessel. So there are lots of parallels. And then looking at that, really my route in was actually I had to do another sort of hop, step and a jump. So oil and gas. So I got into the oil and gas industry, but again, as an electrical specialist, but looking at connections and private networks and how we utilize energy, but not just electricity. And then really my in when I spotted utilities in particular was through a national energy company, a blue chip organization, and I got through actually even in the training route. So part of my my career, and I would say I was sort of in that position of sort of senior specialist in your pole, really looked at those transferable skills that I'd learned as a trainer and as somebody supporting other younger individuals coming through the grassroots, and really got into training. But also whilst training others on the basics and also private networks, I managed to train myself for transferable skills and also for the tickets and qualifications required to work in the distribution network operator, licensed electricity distribution industry. And it was really good, really key, really telling. And I suppose I think the best piece of advice I could give about getting in is finding somebody, even on LinkedIn or by social media or by word of mouth that already works in the industry, and really just understanding what they do and how they did it as well. And I think this webinar is really good for that. And then I got in through the project management route. So lots of experience in practical practical electricity, dealing with projects and delivering projects, and that was transferable into the distribution network. And again, having an arduous process in terms of testing for behaviors, not only knowledge, but it's your ability, right? So your aptitude and your attitude, some training, and then your experience as well. And it's okay if you don't have particular experience, but you'll also have life experience and experience in the world of work. So that's that was really me, a hop, skip and a jump. But you must keep the faith if that's where you want to get to.
Keep the faith, absolutely. That segues really nicely. Actually, you talked there about qualifications and the likes. I think there's still a perception out there that you need lots of qualifications to get started, and we know that's not true, because if I was to bore everyone crazily about putting all the stats and the data up on the screen, you can see all the various roles that we have are going through, what would have been perceived as a role level, if you like. And they're not all about degrees. They're not all about, A levels and the like. So from what you've seen, I mean, how are employers really assessing people, and what should candidates focus on showing if they're going through that interview process? And Nathan, I'll come to you first, because you talked about that when you were going through that process. It's quite an arduous process. I mean, what should candidates focus on, and are employers still looking for just qualifications?
Yeah. So I don't really think they're looking for qualifications in so many of the entry level roles. So the kind of the level for my apprenticeship was 5 GCSEs, but if you didn't have that still wasn't a problem. They'd be able to get you the extra training when you were on the course to get you over the line there. I was on a cohort of people who had come straight from school like myself, so obviously had our GCSEs there, in a massive mix of grades, but also people who had someone who was ex-forces without any actual qualifications, who was taken on there and was an absolutely brilliant guy. People who were ex-motor trade, someone who was an ex-leisure specialist. It's all sorts, because it's kind of, they really wanted to get to know us as people. They wanted to get to know kind of how we approach problems, kind of how willing we were to learn, kind of how we work as a team. And that's really what matters. It's like, look, as long as you've got the curious mindset, the industry can teach you the rest. And it's even then later on moving between roles in the industry. So yes, I don't have a degree because I've come through the apprenticeship route. But when I moved into a strategy-based role, I'm in what is nominally a degree-required role.
Right.
That's not an issue for me, because I've been able to gain the experience within the industry. I can demonstrate my understanding. And it's a case of, well, once you're in the door, you can move around and qualifications aren't a problem. And then getting in the door, it's kind of, there's those apprenticeship and entry-level options which are open to all, which I would say qualifications aren't really a barrier to.
That I'm glad you said that, Nathan. I think some people kind of consider that, or think maybe that if they go into an industry, then they have to stay in that role all the time. And I think you're a great example of how you can actually move around within those businesses. And you have to think in some of these big employer organizations, some of them are global companies, and they're employing people, in all corners of the world. And I think what I've seen is certainly people moving between, and Rob, you've mentioned it as well, moving between training type roles, operational roles, in oil and gas, in energy. And I think the important thing is to remember that whilst all these roles got different levels, and they'll be, associated with different levels of responsibilities and salaries and everything else, and you can kind of have a look at some of the sites, which we'll show you later in this episode. But I think the important thing is actually getting your foot in the door and getting into a business which is, it's focused on delivering that transition to net zero. It's got, it's got some great opportunities for people working in the sector and individual organisations as well. And whilst we're absolutely trying to nail this transition to net zero, it's going to take time, and we need people at all levels to do that. So I think that's a great example. How about yourself, Rob?
So I always say to people, and we were in this conversation just this morning, and I've been doing some interviewing actually, Steve, today, funnily enough. And look, knowledge, ability, training, experience. So they're the four key measures, okay, and that's part of law as well. We won't get into that too much. And your ability is attitude and aptitude. So I remind people of those pillars when they're speaking to folks, whether it be an interview environment, whether they're talking about what they do in a role and how they want to get into the industry. And that's really really right as well. You don't need all of the knowledge. I mean, my advice would be to understand there's lots and lots of open source information with regards to the energy transition, the NISO website, for instance, National Grid Transmission's website. There's lots and lots of websites, all the other distribution network operators and anybody else that uses electricity and energy widely is to have a read. Digital age as well, you can even get AI to have a look at that and try and level against against those skills pillars that are again widely published with regards to your education and also your vocation. I think for me as well, much like Nathan, unconventional means and ways in. As long as you can understand the basics of a drawing, you can sketch something. Us as engineers love a sketch. Okay, so as long as you can sketch and communicate, so you don't even have to be good at the written word, or perhaps even really numerically minded. I wasn't when I first started, and some people mid-career may tell you how they looked after me. As we went through our upper education and our higher education into the engineer scheme, but being able to communicate effectively, being able to assimilate, and understand the situation, scenario, and I think above all else is look after yourself and others, and safety. So I think our industry is much, it is very, very centered around safety. Yeah. Operational safety, psychological safety, and being able to really carry out a process. So if you carry out a process and also understand where that may fail, and have some lateral thinking, I think that's absolutely you're set for a job in the energy industry or the electricity industry. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely endorse that. Safety is absolutely number one priority. There's a service to deliver, but we need to do so safely. And absolutely, the energy industry ensures that is number one priority. So look, that's great. So we're talking about kind of all these opportunities, but let's think about the reality then of coming into those roles. I mean, for people that are in a different world of work, they're kind of outside of miles away from energy industry. They kind of think that I have nothing to do with this. But what does it actually look and feel like on a day-to-day basis if you're coming in to that entry-level role? Rob, shall I come to you first on that? I know it was a while back. Right? But
yeah,
but you're dealing with those people that are at that level. So how does that feel?
I asked some real basic questions when we're triaging this, right? So we go knowledge, ability, training, experience, and I'll keep banging and harping on about that. But then I go, do you like working outside or inside? Do you like the fresh air or not? How do you cope in confined spaces or smaller spaces? Do you prefer working in an office environment or alone, or as a team or a small team? And really, when what you try to do is get a feel for the individual. So much like what Nathan was saying when he was having his arduous assessment centre, if you don't like working at height, you're not going to work on overhead lines. So why would you do that? And it's really about us as leaders and also everybody down into entry level, really simplifying those questions so you can get the understanding. So if you don't mind working outside and you actually like working outside, and you love, handling cables, and you love actually seeing the fruits of your labour, and you don't mind a manual job, then perhaps a cable jointer. If you like to do the same, but you don't mind heights, and you love watching sunrises every morning, overhead lines person, substation fitters, etc. It's, there's more practical roles, but it's not just about that as well. So if you don't like doing those core trades and what I think you'd see the main pillars of the energy industry, Steve, project management, office management, organization, team support. There's lots and lots of things that in the background that make the industry tick, and drivers, store people, absolutely everybody that needs to make the industry tick. So that it's not just those core technical roles or the non-technical support roles, but lots of other, transport, logistics, procurement, all sorts of roles within the energy industry that you can get into, and that's what you're looking for, is what you enjoy and what you enjoy doing. You'll never work in your day in your life, will you? So that's kind of that would be my first take. And then the second take would be looking at some of those qualifications and some of that communication, and some of those behavioural attitude and aptitude traits, and then we start getting into training and relevant experience, and then wider experience. So as we move through those pillars, Steve, you can see that I started really about the individual and the behaviors and how they might be receptive, what they enjoy doing. And you'll find a lot of that as we go through interviews, through different levels of authorization for different voltages, and also through different jobs. I think here, personally for us, we say it's a revolving door. So you can leave at the end of the day, but you're not going to leave the company. You just go back in the door and go somewhere else to another department. And I think that is testament to the industry as well. You can always transfer and do something different. You don't have to leave. And I think it goes back to that security and what Nathan was saying earlier in the head of the meeting.
That's. I think you're absolutely right there. The opportunities and the different types of jobs which are available, and find something which you enjoy and do that every day. You never work another day in your life, isn't it? It's that old adage, and I think that's really important. Nathan, this is really interesting for me, because I know we had the conversation before this, and you talked about, well, you came in and did this job, but I didn't fancy that, so I went around and did this job instead. So yeah, tell us about the reality when you were in that entry-level role, and then where you went to next.
Yeah, so I am always willing to put my hands up and say that when I applied for that apprenticeship, I didn't entirely know what I was getting into, because it's always really hard to know what the role is before you go into it, and especially in a role that's quite niche kind of in this industry. So yeah, I was walking in a bit blind. I knew, I'm going to go work on a substation, woo. But I didn't know exactly what that entailed, and it was really interesting to actually know kind of like, I'm out doing this, I'm out maintaining kit, all weathers, and really enjoyed it at times, but also knew that I kind of want to try something else as well, because I spent 3 odd years kind of going and maintaining this kit, and I thought, well, I kind of want to know how it's planned now. And that's when I made a move quite weirdly a couple of years ago, into a more strategic focus role. Kind of went from one end of it to the complete other end of the chain there. And I'm in probably what's now a more stereotypical office job, but it's still an engineering role. It's still looking at the future of the system. It's still really kind of setting kind of that framework for the future there, and still very much a stretching role as well, which I'm really glad about. And in both of those roles, there's never been a dull day, even when I've wanted one. But yeah, there's all sorts. And just to shout out what Rob did earlier, it's kind of, there's so many opportunities, like us two other engineers, but there's so many people who sit around us. So even in my current role now, I've been working with people who've been in public affairs, stakeholder management, procurement, all of that stuff. Like there are so many energy roles that you don't expect are energy,
Yeah.
that are needed just to keep the industry moving. So I will say there's always a role for everyone in energy. And I think so many of the people that I work with never expected to be in the energy industry. But yeah, they are.
Yeah, yeah. Great story, Nathan. Absolutely. Look, I came from a forces background. I started off much the same as Rob, in fact. But you know, and actually, your career journey, your pathway takes you where you're trying to evolve. You're developing all the time, and I think certainly previously, you know, being in the nuclear side and then coming into the kind of energy and utility side, I think it's you know, it just shows how many opportunities or great kind of options that people have coming into the industry and different places to think about. Rob, you mentioned stores, drivers, you know, but you have to think about that entire value chain of energy, or the entire kind of everything that's involved in energy, right the way down from generation. So is it a, you know, gas fired power station? Is it a nuclear site? Is it offshore winds? Is it solar? Is it, you know, they're right the way through the transmission, distribution networks, down to people's homes, right? So putting EV charge points in, smart meters, and you know, solar panels, and people don't think, crikey, you know, but actually they're the front line people. There's an entire back office element of that support that goes along with that. So therefore roles for everyone, and therefore you can transition around, which probably brings me on to that next piece then. So when someone gets in, the training and support that they can expect. I mean, yeah, what was your take on that? And I know National Grid really well, right? So to Rob and Nathan, you just mentioned that, but a few, and I know they got a fantastic training infrastructure. But just tell me a little bit about your experiences, about kind of what you can expect when you get into the industry. Rob, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, I think thanks, Steve. I think as well, just to echo you bit about the different trades, and I'll use that as a segue into answering this question. You know, civils engineers, large civil projects, you know, a substation always starts out with you breaking ground, all right, surveying, etc. So you know, it's all about that. And then I think in terms of what you're expected for your support, because we're such a safety driven industry, and because it's such, you know, the customers at the end of whatever we're transmitting or distributing are really important. It is quite safety critical, so you know, it's often attached to some form of competence or authorization, and again we go back to those 4 pillars that I've said I'd annoy you with Steve, all webinar. But that's how we measure it. Okay, so each role would be defined and a set of competencies for each level. It may be attached to pay and reward as well, but we won't get into that. But in terms of moving through, you always have something that is slightly more complicated. So you know, so what Nathan was saying earlier, you know, he would have started out with smaller tasks. And then moving on through mechanical systems and into electrical systems and into complex controls, automation, protection, etc. So you can transition as you go through in the current role that you're in, or you can decide, you know, actually I've got X amount of experience and I want to do the next thing. And that can be transferred, and 90% of it would be retained. You could go in as well to understanding how the system operates and planning it. But I think for me, in terms of what to expect, you're always measured from a competency perspective across those 4 key pillars, and then supported. And I think the education comes as you go through those roles. I would say I don't think it's for me, in my own personal experience, it isn't the other way around, because you really do need that experience and that exposure and that ability to be able to work, and then you're supplied with the knowledge to back that up. And often I find as well, you do that in parallel. You're expected to learn all the way through, and you are always learning as that technology adjusts. You know, it gets safer. We operate it differently. We have a different energy mix. Sinead will take us through as well, but I'm sure. But you know, it's always changing and always evolving. So in terms of, you know, how you in your early career, you are classed as vulnerable, whether you're coming in as an adult trainee or as an apprentice or somebody that isn't competent. You know, for me, in my own experience, I did a lot of underground high voltage apparatus, and then transitioning onto overhead. Well, I was just as vulnerable as somebody else starting out on day one. So, we have a thing called under personal supervision within the safety rules, and you are personally supervised until you're at that level of competence, and you're always taken through against those 4 pillars. So it's an absolutely excellent industry for catching that, making sure you're competent, making sure you're safe, and making sure you're supported, and that knowledge comes after as well from an educational perspective.
Oh, that's great, Rob. And that link back to the safety element there, I think that training, which is appropriate to the role that you're in, I think is really important, isn't it? And there's quite clear structures around authorizations and what you can work on, etc. But and that's great to hear. I'm sure that's reassuring for people coming into industry. Nathan, how about yourself? What's your experience?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Rob said there. It's really well structured. I think the thing I would always add is that as you're applying and as you're entering the industry, no one expects you to have the niche internal knowledge. No one is going to ask you in your interview, how do you top up the gas on the circuit breaker? How do you apply field earth in the substation? And I bet you that if you asked me in my interview what those words meant, I probably would have just looked at you funny anyway. You will learn on the job. It's really well structured as to kind of how, especially on the safety critical stuff, you gain those authorizations. I was gaining my authorizations all the way up to and including when I was leaving operations. And yeah, in a really, really well structured way. And then even in my current role, where slightly less of a safety focus on the training, but there's still so much kind of development and training on my commercial awareness or my technical awareness and the other sections of that. And that I think goes for both the direct entry roles, but also for the apprenticeship scheme as well, where on that apprenticeship I had so much structured training at National Grid's training centre in Nottinghamshire about how equipment works, how the system works, because I was 16 at the time. No one expected me to know when I came on day one, great, here's how the grid works, and here's how you go operate it, and here's how you go switch it. Because no one expects you to know that on day one. And no one expects you to know that on day 365 or so on, because you're learning throughout your career.
That again, back to that point about safety and career progression, really, really important. And also, I think some of the retention rates within industry are fantastic as well. If you come into the energy industry, generally you're going to stay there for an awful long time, right? But I'm not looking at you there, Rob. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking of myself more than anything else. I mean, but I think it's a true testament to where those careers potentially can take you, and actually some of the opportunities which are then laid out in front of you potentially around progression are part of that. But Rob, I'll come to you on this one if I could, please. I mean, what does progression look like from that entry level role? And we talked about increments and kind of and things, and and how do you turn that from where you initially went, looks like a all right place to go sort of thing? How do you turn that into that long-term career as you have done?
I think it's structure. I absolutely agree with Nathan. And I suppose, we talk about the competency wheel. Okay. So, being unconsciously incompetent, it shouldn't be an offensive term. You just don't know what you don't know. We have to attach a definition to that. And you won't for 2 or 3 years, as Nathan mentioned, you won't know. But you go back to those sort of core things that I covered in the webinar earlier about, where you like working and what you like to do, and the environment that you're comfortable in. I think because there's so much structure, and we talked about those work streams, Steve, and we talked about the different trades and the different specializations and the different stages of the project. And that's why it's really, really important before you sort of decide your trajectory into the energy industry is to understand, civils, electrical, mechanical, logistics, procurement, design, engineering. And then from there, really, in terms of that progression, as long as you understand those key pillars, and I probably haven't covered them all, and I'll get some messages after this goes out live, I'm sure. You forgot about us. I'm very sorry. I think for us, as you're progressing through, like I mentioned earlier, you will interact with all of the different career pathways. And as you're going through the increments of your career pathway, which is very, very well documented in this industry, there will be points of inflection, just like Nathan mentioned, or I mentioned as well, where you can decide to make a move. as well, and not in a disruptive way. You absolutely you might not want to carry on in a practical role for personal reasons. Your life choices might not suit you carrying out an operational job on the network anymore, but equally you can have more of a less dispersed job where you're not riding around the network all day and looking at those amazing sunrises, sunsets, and working with some great people, but you could work with the great people in the planning department or in the logistics department or in procurement. And I think, but there will be an incremental measure of competence throughout any of those roles. And I think really that coupled with the training and those pathways, and such as the skills pillars that you set out, Stephen, your organization, make it really, really simple to understand, because we can count them almost on our hands. And that's kind of, in terms of that progression, in our industry, nobody really leaves. Okay, you might just do something in a different way.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. And look, I think that's really important message to land. And I think how it's not just yes, you can come in, you can start a career, and you can look for other options, and you can absolutely leave, but there are so many great opportunities there that do provide that long career with options that you can move around in. I think it's fantastic. So look, I'm just going to move on. Key thing, what would you say to someone who is interested, but they think that they're not qualified enough, or they're not experienced? There's always something which is going to stop me from getting into this, or I don't think I'd be the kind of person that would fit into this. And bear in mind, we are looking for a diverse workforce going forward. And on our last webinar, we had 3 women from across the networks presenting today, Nathan and Rob. So we are looking at people from, and you may be thinking, oh, I don't know, it's not fit for me, or I don't think I'm ready for it, I'm not right for it. What would you say to them? Nathan, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, so my note in front of me here says there's no normal people in energy. I think the word I was looking for was typical there. There is no typical person in the energy industry. It's if you think you're not the right person, you are the right person. It's genuinely, as long as you're willing to learn, as long as you're willing to develop within your role, there's a place for you here. I'm actually away at a team day with my team, with about 90 people in a room somewhere over there, of all different backgrounds, from all different previous vocations, from all different walks of life, all working together on one massive project. And it works so well. And without any of those people and all of the experience they bring to the table, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. So looking back to when I was 16, I maybe didn't think I was the right person. I really lacked that confidence. I have called myself in the past that squeaky little 16-year-old back at the time. And it was kind of like, and I've looked now at where I am, and the confidence that I've gained in my role at work, the confidence for the stuff I do now in the voluntary sector outside of work as well, and how I've been able to develop in those roles there. So get your foot in the door. You're absolutely the right person for the industry, and you can make it work from there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nathan. Anything else to add to that, Rob?
Absolutely. I think for me, my first advice would be push the button, right? Push apply. Just push that button. I think there's something that we have in all of our operational environments, no matter where you are, not what company, within the safety rules. It's if in doubt, stop and ask questions, be inquisitive. Further to what Nathan says, and I think as well, just one sort of last piece of advice, having no hair is hereditary, right? It's not stressful. It's not a stressful organisation because of the checks and balances that we've got in there as well. So you can stop and ask. You can learn. You can take a moment to understand. But I think be brave, be bold, and press apply.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. That's inspiring, and hopefully it's inspired a few people out there. Before I come to the last question on my list, there's a Q&A section in the function of the webinar. Please do drop a question in there. We will have around about 10 minutes to answer some of those questions as we get towards the end of this. But just before I finish, then I'm going to and I kind of start wrapping up before we go into those audience questions. So just one more question, Nathan. Why now? Why is now such a good time to get into the industry?
I think it's because there's so much going on. It's kind of looking at the expansion of the grid. It's become a major priority for the country, kind of improving infrastructure there. The planning that needs to happen to do that, the civil engineering, the logistics, the communications, all of it links into that. And the growth of offshore renewables and all of that stuff means that there's always something there. If you don't find out you're doing something that you don't enjoy, you know what? You can go elsewhere in the industry because there's so much happening. And because of that, it's such a stable place to be. I've got
Yeah.
people joining other industries coming out of uni, really struggling to find their feet in their industries. But I'm really lucky to know I've got my foot in the door here. There will always be a place for me in this industry as long as I'm willing to learn and develop. And I'm really pleased to know that and yeah, and be able to contribute to that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nathan. I can't emphasize that enough, to be honest. I mean, I think I've seen some numbers about the level of investment. Rob, you'll know this because you're directly linked to it. NISO are kind of supporting that, the kind of development of that and actually what it looks like in the future. But I think there was there were some figures quoted about, to achieve a transition to net zero, we're looking at around 40 billion pounds investment in network infrastructure over the next, it was 5 years, I think, when that came out. So I think there was a report which came out of the future energy scenarios, which National Grid produce and now NISO produce, obviously. So look, there's so much going on, isn't there? That investment. Rob, I hope I'm stealing your answer here, right? But I'll come back to you in a second. But I think that's a really important part. But look, Rob, let me come to you quickly for that one as well.
I think just to build on that though, Steve, everybody's really focused, as Nathan quite rightly mentioned as well, about the upgrades to the grid. In England, Scotland, Wales, the entire UK is looking at that, and also internationally. So it's always about what's open to you domestically, and then how that helps you market yourself internationally if that's something that you want to do, or being able to interact with people internationally as well. So that logistics and supply chain stretches globally, which is something really, really exciting. And it's all about driving the other infrastructure projects within the UK, be it high-speed rail, electrification of rail, decarbonisation of transport, electrification in general and mobility, growing our cities and infrastructures, new towns, Steve, as well. That were being suggested and putting out for planning, regional energy system planning that comes through as well from colleagues at NISO, as well as the usual grid upgrades and also our connections activity. So I think for us and for us as contractors here within the group that I work in at the moment, we're seeing that it's unprecedented, and that level of investment, not only in the grid but also in the people. So I mentioned that previously, Steve, as well. Most of it's centered around people.
Yeah.
And this is where we are, and without the people, we won't be able to build it. So a lot of people sort of get into other industries, or we'll take the sort of data center industry and those large demand customers as well. That's absolutely perfectly fine, but we still need the folks that are able to lay the cables, design the substations, break ground, build them, overhead lines, refurbish them, respond to the faults, and keep the lights on. So all the other great pieces of infrastructure in our nation can function. And I think, if that excites you and that's the underpinning reason why you get out of bed in the morning, then absolutely. I think that's it's a great piece, isn't it, to look at?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a great shout, Rob. I love that. It's it's certainly something which is dear to my heart. And whenever NISO do say things like this 40 billion pound investment, I said, there's an awful lot of investment needed in people as well to deliver that, because they're not sat on the shelf at the moment. So look, I think it's you can't have one without the other. We definitely need to invest in the infrastructure. We definitely need to achieve that transition to net zero, and only through a combination of investment and people will we be able to do that. So everyone's got to be on board. Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. So look, I've got a couple of questions which I'm going to come to. First of all, Laura's asked, what's the energy industry doing to support many of the thousands of individuals in the oil and gas industry with the UK continental shelves facing redundancy and looking for support? Absolutely brilliant question, Laura. There is quite a bit of work going on in that space at the moment, certainly with investment from Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, Office of Clean Energy Jobs, looking at things like the Energy Skills Passport and future iterations of that. Certainly as within my business, energy and utility skills, we are looking at potential sector platform to be able to support people through that entire journey into industry. But look, there are thousands or hundreds, or if not thousands, of organizations out there that are looking for similar skills that are being employed in the oil and gas industry at the moment, which are quite easily transferable across into the clean energy sector. So please do go and have a look at some of the links, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on in the presentation. So now another one from David is, how big would the jump be from a rail electrification engineer isolation to transmission distribution roles? Rob, shall I come to you on that one first?
Yeah, sure. Quite easily. I would have thought. I think the best thing to advise there would be on the electrification projects is to get to know the transmission and distribution engineers and folks that are responding and working on that side of the boundary. You'll understand what I'm talking about specifically. The person asking that question, Steve, in terms of the electrical boundary, it is just an electrical boundary, but it shouldn't be a boundary to your growth. And it's what we talked about earlier. Ask the questions. Press apply. Have a look at the skills pathway, and also have a look at those websites as well. And that portal, that you quite rightly mentioned, is much needed, Steve. But in terms of actually what to physically do, just speak to the folks that are on the other side of the fence, quite literally, and that'll be your first key takeaway into what you need to do. And then just make sure you go on those websites and apply. Put your authorizations on from Network Rail, put your requisite training experience in from the railway industry, and update your CV. So it's really, really simple and clear. Get out those key pillars of competence that we talked about, and then also maybe explain why you'd like to change as well. So to Nathan's point, it's about just tell your journey, tell your story, show your journey, and then from there, absolutely, I think it's there should be no boundaries whatsoever, Steve.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And question for you, Nathan. With how competitive the current employment market is, how do you stand out, and where do you find these roles and experience? I've somewhat relevant degree, but not experience. I think this is really good for you, Nathan, because you kind of came in from you weren't aligned to where you are now, and you kind of got there. Yes. So how does that work?
So there's two things I'd recommend. One is just be constantly looking. So when I was looking actually to move over from my previous role, I just saw it on the job board. It just popped up. I had no indication it was coming. So genuinely just keep an eye out. And I know I've got a couple of friends who are looking to change industries as well, doing the same, and kind of actually reach out to me, go, hey, what do you think about this? And hey, got any idea on that? So just keep an eye out. The NESO website, the National Grid website, the DNO websites, all of those are really good places to look. The apprenticeship opportunities are slightly more structured because they're often released in a company all at the same time at a certain point of the year. I can't remember off the top of my head when most of the major ones are at the minute, but keep an eye out for those because they're usually dropped at one time. So, but you're saying you've got a somewhat relevant degree, it's kind of the direct entry roles, keep an eye out. And yeah, anything that you think is interesting, apply. And even if you don't perfectly match the criteria, I didn't perfectly match the criteria for my role. And yeah, just have that conversation.
Give it a go. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks very much. Look, I've run out of time on these questions, unfortunately. I apologize that there's 2 or 3 which I can't get to, but there's a couple of people asking about roles in different or in locations. I'll show you a website in a minute you can have a look at, but please do go and have a look at that. But look, I think I'll just round up by saying, first of all, thank you very much for the insights. Really, really interesting, both Rob and Nathan. Hopefully everyone's found it super interesting. If you're watching today and you've ever thought, well, maybe this sector isn't for me, I hope the conversation has changed that. It's challenged your thinking, because the truth is, energy needs people and new perspectives and new talent. It's not just about people that come in as graduates, it's at all levels. So we need to be opening people's minds up to thinking about a career into energy and stepping forward on that basis. The scale of demand in our skills strategy is set out. It's phenomenal. 312,000 by 2030. So a lot of people coming into industry, and that's right the way across all levels: management, technical, and entry level roles. So look, really the call to action here is, if you're looking for a new opportunity, or you know someone who is, please take a look at the links, which I'm going to show you in a second on the screen, and please do get involved. But whilst I'm doing that, whilst I'm going to just share my screen, Rob, can I ask you, and Nathan, I'll come to you in a second, just to share one golden gem that you would like to tell people? What would you tell people that are thinking about that career, and what should they be doing about it? How should they make that leap?
I think first and foremost, it's what I went back to earlier, Steve. It's just being brave. Okay, be brave, believe in yourself, and believe in your experiences that you've got already, and just make sure that you educate yourself on the open source information that's available. There's lots and lots out there, and just ask yourself, how do I bridge, and what could I bring, and what is the transferable skills? What do I do now in electricity supply or distribution or energy, or do I deal with any form of energy whatsoever? And what would that mean to that open source information? And I think if you spend 10, 15 minutes doing that, you'll head up with a whole raft and a whole list of things we talked about in those 4 pillars. So, knowledge, ability, training, experience. Just concentrate on those, list those down, and you'll have a sheet of A4, I guarantee.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And Nathan?
And yeah, my recommendation would be just do it. I have never made a move in my career that I had ever expected to do, or that I could have predicted from where I previously was. And people ask, "Oh, where do you think I'm going to be in 10 years?" I genuinely do not know, based on my current trajectory. And I think that's what's really exciting. Kind of, it's once your foot's in the door, you can really work things out from there, as long as you're willing to learn, and truly find a space for you in the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So look, thank you both. There's a QR code up on screen. If you can please use that to give us a bit more information on what you'd like to see in future episodes. I have a long list of people that have interesting stories that want to join the webinars. If you do, or are interested in being part of the webinars in the future, or part of the industry already, then please do reach out to me. You'll find me on LinkedIn, or please do drop a note in via this future webinar episodes. This will be on as a recording later on Destination Energy website as well. But other information, if you want to find out more, take a look at the Destination Energy website there on the left hand side. And also the next webinar which we have planned is coming in on the 25th of June, and that will be covering, or we'll be looking at armed forces, ex-forces entering into industry. There is a list of our partner organizations at the bottom there. When you go onto the Destination Energy website, if you go on there, you'll be able to click on a number of job sites on there. Not all of the links do take you to job sites, and we're actually updating the website. It only went live last week with the details of lots of jobs. And I know, for example, Energy and Utility Careers and Jobs has got around 500 or 600 jobs on their. Destination Nuclear as well has jobs on there. iGEM and a number of the others also have jobs. So please do go and take a look. And these are live opportunities which are there right now. So please do go and take a look at that. But look, I'll just round up by saying thank you to all of you for joining us. Please do sign up on that Destination Energy website for the next webinar. Whilst it's aimed at ex-forces, we'll have people in from industry talking about their experience and how they got into industry, and what that transition was like for them. And I think that story will be beneficial to everyone. These webinars are running over the next 12 months. So we'll run this and through to March next year. So please do keep following us, and hopefully we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks very much and have a good afternoon.